So what I may want to ask you about is what your research is, why you chose it, and then how you think about doing your research. Like, how do you identify what is a quality research idea, what is not, and then what is your process of thinking through that? And then also, what are specific research bottlenecks that you have? So that's both bottlenecks in terms of like not enough funding, not enough people working on the problem, and then specific like actual technical problems which need to be worked on. And then after that as well, what specific skill sets, as in like category theory, number theory, etc., are needed to work on which specific bottlenecks. Yeah.
Can you just say all of that again, and I'm going to write it down because it was a lot of questions.
Okay. Yeah. I'm also going to be making notes on this, by the way, which I'm very happy to share. So what I'm going to be asking you about is like what your research is, why you chose it, and then how you think about your research. So how do you identify what is a good research idea, what's not a good research idea, and then maybe also like things which look like good research ideas but not, and how you identify those, and then what your specific bottlenecks are, whether that's funding, the number of people, people with a certain type of skill set, and then also the specific technical problems, which are the bottlenecks. And then what are the skill sets needed to make progress and solve those bottlenecks, whether that's category theory, number theory, etc., etc. Yeah, so all sound good? Or is there anything else which is missing? If there's anything else which is missing from that, which you think is important to cover, I'm more than happy to do so. The main thing that I want to sort of like get out of this conversation is I want to make a really high quality research guide, so that if someone else wants to work on your research or something similar to that, then there isn't information which is like locked away in your brain, which is necessary to make progress on the research, if that makes sense. Like, this is how to think about the idea or something.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, maybe we'll have more questions that evolve during the conversation, but I think a big piece of context that you should be aware of is that I'm not currently pursuing like alignment research.
Okay.
Yeah, I pivoted away from that roughly in 2024, although I was already sort of pivoting away earlier. The reason for that is basically that I think alignment is too hard to solve. And so now I'm working more on human intelligence enhancement.
Oh, yeah, I heard about this from Sahil or something, I think, yeah. Okay. Okay, so
I mean,
I'm also interested in that. Okay, cool. So pivot away to...
I'm certainly happy to talk about that. I'm also happy to talk about your questions about alignment research. I can say things about it. It's just that it's an important piece of context.
Yeah. So okay. So in that case, this will be basically the same questions, but in the past tense. Because I do want to know, like, what research you were working on, why you felt too hard, etc., etc.
So I'll try to directly like answer the object level questions, but just to finish the framing, like one or two implications of that background context are that, first of all, I'm pretty unlikely to be leading the research in even in my own little niche of research, and therefore, practically speaking, that's just practically speaking important for anyone who thinks that my type of research or line of research is important. They would have to either themselves be ready to step up as a leader and or be finding other people. So I don't know what he's up to, but for example, I briefly had as like a student or mentee person, Mateusz Baginski, who can be found on Less Wrong.
Oh, okay.
I'll text you his name.
I think I remember seeing his face. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, he's probably around. I don't know what he's up to. He might be interested.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay.
But
definitely.
But, we did some amount of thinking together. So, and he, at least in the past, had some interest in some of my kind of research questions and perspectives. So, yeah. So that's a piece of framing. Yeah, just okay. And okay, so a little bit more object level. Okay.
Yeah.
Your question was what is my research, or what was my research? Okay. Well, yeah, basically I want to solve the hard part of the hard alignment problem, which means figuring out how you can make okay, you know what that means. I think basically my perspective is pretty heavily influenced by
Actually, I would be really interested in hearing your definition of the hard part of alignment problem, because I find it often like really poorly and vaguely defined, and I'm always interested like how people try to define it.
Yeah. So the functional definition is like the practical, like the operational meaning is understanding enough to design a mind that is genuinely smarter than humans, but does not kill everyone and instead does stuff that we like. Now, I say it, that may sound sort of almost contentless, but it's important to say it that way because, for example, I would definitely not say alignment means making the AI have human goals or pursuing human values or anything like that. That would be that's one way of approaching the problem, but I actually don't view that as the most promising frame, because basically I think that you need corrigibility, and that having corrigibility is sort of a separate problem from that thing about having the AI have like the same values as humans or something, or pursuing the things that humans want the AI to pursue. It's sort of a different problem from corrigibility, and furthermore, it's, at least in the sort of naive understanding of like, have the AI have human values. The naive way of understanding that is actually kind of incompatible with corrigibility, or at least it looks that way. Because of the problem, for example, because of the problem of fully updated deference. Have you heard of this?
I know having a problem of
fully updated deference. So that's a problem in corrigibility. I'm pretty sure that phrase would be Eliezer's. It's probably written about on Arbital, which has hopefully been, I think it's been ported over to Less Wrong. I can find that link if you have trouble finding it later. But so fully updated deference, the problem is if you imagine, so one thing that people propose as a way of understanding corrigibility, so corrigibility means the literal meaning, the word means correctability. In other words, will the AI continue to be correctable by the human? Like if you like set up an AI system, you design a mind or something, or you grow a mind. Now you have a mind that is like understanding the world, doing science, inventing new ways of thinking, figuring out how to manipulate the world, blah, blah, blah. So it's doing all that stuff, and you're like, okay, cool. But I realized now, after seeing it start to do stuff in the world, that I like fucked up some basic aspect of the overall structure of the mind, and now it's like doing stuff that I don't like. It's not listening to me. It's not listening to like I want to tell it like you misunderstood my values on this particular subject, or it's doing some bad decision theory, like it's capitulating to threats or whatever it's doing, where I'm like, this is trending in a really bad direction. I need to correct it right now before this gets bad. You want the AI to be open to human correction. You don't want the way that the AI is trying to steer the world to cause it to steer the world away from humans being able to correct it. One previous way of approaching this was value uncertainty, where you're sort of like, the AI is uncertain about what the values are, what its values are, or something. You could say like, maybe the AI just doesn't know what humans value, and so the reasoning would go like, AI doesn't know what humans value, but it does have access to actual humans. So what it should do is, one might hope, is it would just leave the humans alive and autonomously reasoning and figuring out our values autonomously from the AI. And that way the AI is like, oh, if I leave the humans alive, they'll keep figuring out their values, which will help me resolve my uncertainty about what the correct values are, because my correct values are what the humans value. So that's the hope, but that hope probably just doesn't work. So if the AI fully updates, the problem with this hope is that it's not really baking in corrigibility in like a fundamental way. It's just saying, while the AI is uncertain about what's going on in the humans,
the AI could just say, oh, I'm uncertain, so let me just find a bunch of values which I think are this, and then I'll make myself more certain, or a bunch of other stuff.
I mean, even if I guess like the core issue, or one of the core issues is like, even if you successfully make the AI not making up values, but really acting as though it is uncertain, even if you can do that, which we don't know how to do anyway, but even if you could, it's like fully updated deference. So fully updated means like, suppose the AI does like an autopsy, and we don't object to it doing an autopsy on a human because, it's a dead body.
Sure.
So the AI does an autopsy and like scans every single detail of the brain down to like protein DNA level. And now it like has all this information about the sort of the generating function for human values. Now it's fully, you can imagine it's like fully updated. Like it has enough information that it can figure out on its own what humans will eventually say that they value. And now is it still corrigible? Like maybe there's still something really wrong with the way that the AI is set up that we would want to correct. But that isn't just like you got the values wrong, but something else, like how to implement the values or something. If the AI is fully
like you've misinterpreted.
Yeah, you misinterpreted it. You have a bad decision theory that's sort of like reflectively stable, but is still bad according to us. Or there's like ambiguity in human values, and you resolved it in a way we don't like. Or it turns out that we don't want you, the AI, to be taking over the whole universe. We want you to more like be an assistant for us as we explore the galaxy or something.
Okay.
So the issue is, sorry, this is quite a tangent, but I guess my point, what I'm trying to communicate is that the types of worries that you might have about an AI are not just it had the wrong utility function, like it was trying to steer the world towards the wrong set of world states. And so the whole framing of the problem as trying to get the right utility function there is, from my perspective, a sort of impoverished view of the problem. So that's one point. So your question was, what was my research? Well, basically the research is...
Yes. If it's okay, just before we get to that, do you think it makes more sense to say what your research was and then say why you stopped pursuing it or why you thought the Align problem was too hard? Or do you think it makes more sense to first say why you thought the Align problem was too hard and then say what your research was?
Either way, whichever you're more interested in.
Yeah, so I think... I think saying like what your research was and then why you think it was too hard, I think that'd be fine. Yeah, sorry, shut up.
Look, I'm a very rambly person, but I won't bore you. I mean, I think you should just interrupt me and ask the questions that you want, the information that you want to hear.
Cool, I will do. Cool. Yeah. I will do. I mean, so your research?
I guess like to try to give a brief description, it's like trying to understand minds, and in particular understand what ends up determining like, if you have a mind, it might make something happen in the universe. If it's a very powerful mind, it probably like controls the future of the universe, or like the future light cone or something. And then there's like a free parameter of like, what does it do with the world? And the question is, what determines that? This is a very simple question.
Sorry.
We don't know the answer.
So what determines what, sorry?
If you have a mind, that's very strong, like very good at making stuff happen in the world, then there's a free parameter, which is what, like, it could make there be a lot of diamonds, it could make there be a lot of paper clips, it could make there be a lot of conscious beings having fun, it could make there be whatever. So there's a free parameter of like, what does it make the world look like? And then there's the question of, if you have a mind, what determines the setting of that free parameter? I'm sort of just asking what determines a mind's values, but I'm trying to ask it in a slightly different way. Yeah.
Okay. And so, like, how did you try to find that out? Like, how did you try to, or what did you actually do your research? Like, what kind of like specific problems within that were you trying to solve?
It's mostly not working on specific problems. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah. So this is, you might not like this, and it's fair to not like this, but I will stand behind it. That like a lot of the methodologies that people seem to like are just not equipped for this problem, and we have to take a more, I guess you would call it philosophical or sort of very theoretically. Yeah. So basically, I think that we have to take a very circumspect approach, where by circumspect I mean not baking in assumptions about what sort of question we're trying to answer or the methodology. Like the fundamental thing to be paying attention to, or one of the fundamental things to be paying attention to, is just we're deeply confused about what determines what a mind will do with the universe, as I was saying. And just paying attention to the fact that we're deeply confused about that. Like, and then from there you can go into specific questions and attempts at understanding that. Okay, I don't know. So I guess we can go into some more detail, but most of it is going to be me saying ways that things don't work.
Sure, that's fine. If it's okay, I actually like more kind of like a chronological view. Like when you were working on like alignment research, for example, what would be your day-to-day kind of thing? Like if we go back to, like, say, a random day in 2023, when you're working on alignment research, what would that day look like?
Okay, so from in university, which was for me was 2011 to 2015, that would look like studying math and doing a little bit of like reading, less wrong sequences, Eliezer's writing, less wrong sequences and older stuff by Eliezer, because he was the only alignment researcher for half of the existence of the field. So like creating friendly AI is pretty good. I definitely recommend people read that. Reading timeless decision theory paper. Then from 2015 to 2020-ish, it was a mix of trying to like do math about probability theory and logical uncertainty and decision theory, and then also doing some philosophy of decision theory, where the motivation for, so decision theory is like it's a somewhat technical area. You can
so you said after probability theory, you said logical induction or something? Logical
uncertainty. So logical induction was Scott Garabrandt's kind of like partial solution to some of the problems there. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. And when you be working, doing this math, what kind of problems would you be trying to solve with the math?
Well, so for decision theory, you're looking for, well, it depends on the exact context. You're sort of like looking for, you're looking at like toy problems, like toy decision problems or toy game theory problems, where the behavior's interesting. So that might mean like demonstrating a case where you think that the really true correct behavior is X, but the formally defined decision theories that you have, instead of X, they do Y, and Y seems worse. And like, can I construct a different formally specified rule that does X? Yeah.
What I'm looking for here, maybe this is the wrong thing to be looking for. If it's the wrong thing to be looking for, please just tell me. I will just try something else instead.
Okay.
Is what specific things you are working on? So what specific problems? So for example, like from my brief chat with Vanessa, I know she was working on learning theory, trying to make like some agent to learn the things that's desirable to learn. I'm talking with Abram, I know he's working on tiling agents, like understanding trust, like how do you really trust that, how do you know you can trust an agent, stuff like that. And then we went through like a bunch of specific problems within that. And like similarly, so in talking about like facade and so on and so forth. So that's kind of like what I'm trying to get to. Like what, like, so I get, okay, this is what decision theory is, sort of probability theory is, etc. But within that, what specific math problems or other problems, if it was something else, we're trying to work on? Like, what specific problem were you trying to solve? That kind of thing.
Well, I'm okay. I'm not sure what you mean by specific, but okay. So I mean the specific overarching problem is reflective stability. An example of a more concrete thing would be asymptotic decision theory. I mean, that wasn't mainly my. Okay, wait, sorry. I don't think I personally had that much like research success in these areas. Okay. So I can't really like point to a thing. I mean, I helped out with like writing up logical induction, which I think was a very cool thing, but that's like mainly Scott's research insights. I worked on asymptotic decision theory, which was, I mean, asymptotic, I don't remember how much I participated. I don't know. So asymptotic decision theory is an idea of like, okay, so well, the general thing I mentioned, which is reflective stability, is the idea of like trying to understand when it's the case that a mind would want to self-modify in a deep way, like fundamentally change its decision theory, like fundamentally change how it thinks about making decisions. So then there's one way of exploring that is like, suppose you have, so, okay, I don't know how much detail okay, I could go into more detail, but the overarch, okay. Well, so, I mean, a little story you could tell would be like, so first you have like these isolated problems. I don't know if you've probably heard of Newcomb's problem.
Yeah.
You've heard of counterfactual mugging.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that sort of problem is supposed to demonstrate something about which decision theories are good or bad. But there's always this awkward problem where there's never really an answer to those things because or it's weird to think of there as being an answer to such a problem because so like one issue would be well, in general it's weird to think of those because it's sort of making a single isolated decision is like a weird it's a bit hard to think of there as being like a right way to make oh, you sent me a doc?
Oh yeah, sorry, that's just in case you want to like also see what I'm writing, and comment on if I'm getting something wrong. Is the tab that this is in is inside the event prep tab, and then inside that there is the interviews tab, and inside that is Agent Foundation Researchers.
cool. So there's the problem of wait, event. Oh, I see, event prep. Okay, so like the question is what it's just it's sort of strange to when you like justify that some way of making decisions is good or bad. Part of the like natural justification is like, well, if you make decisions this way in general, then you will do better or worse in general. But when you're saying that, you're assuming that, or you're using this like background context of lots and lots of decisions, and you're saying if you make lots of decisions this way, then like overall, like in the aggregate, an expectation, you'll do better if you make decisions this way versus that. But that's not how we analyze specific problems. We're like, here's just like one-off scenario. So that's like one motivation for asymptotic decision theory, where you're like, instead of looking at a single problem, let's look at like an infinite series of problems and then ask about asymptotic behavior, asymptotic performance. So
instead of looking at one single problem, looking at a big series of problems. Can you go back to that, the motivation for asymptotic decision theory, please, and expand a bit more on that, please? Is that okay?
I'll try. I mean, this is like a decade ago, so.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, well, maybe I'll just restate, and then we can try a different way if it doesn't work. The thing I was trying to say was like when you look at the counterfactual mugging, I mean, if I say you should pay up, like the AI comes to you and says, you know, give me $5 because I flipped this coin, and if it had come up tails, it came up heads, so I'm asking you for $5. But if it had come up tails, I would have given you $1 million, but only if I thought that you would pay up $5 if it came up heads, and it did come up heads. So you're not going to get the $1 million, but hypothetically, you might have gotten the $1 million if you give me the $5 now. Right? That's the counterfactual mugging.
Sure.
And like. Yeah. The justification for paying up, I mean, I think the correct thing to do is to pay up. Oh yeah, maybe you haven't like argued through this.
I just disagree basically with the premise of a lot of counterfactual mugging scenarios. Like I think like it's because I think like in real life we don't actually get like a perfect predictor of ourselves, or like something which really approaches that perfect predictor. And generally like when someone has that level of thing, we should not set a precedent of like, okay, if you can predict me really well, then you can do counterfactual mugging with me. That if we instead set the precedent that like that you can't counterfactually mug me, then that seems like a better precedent to set to me than like setting yourself up as someone who can be counterfactually mugged, if that makes sense. Because if suppose someone like can predict you like 60% of the time or 70% of the time, then the more like it seems to me like vaguely the more open you are to counterfactual mugging or being counterfactually mugged, then the less well you need to be predicted in order for that to be successful for you. If that makes sense.
Okay, I think that makes sense, but I would view that as a good thing. I mean, maybe the name is misleading, or I don't know. Like when we're saying mugging, it's like
no, I mean we can call it like we can call it like well, like getting a happy person or whatever, right?
well, but like if it's like suppose it's before the whole scenario, or like in other words, suppose that Omega, the predictor, is Omega's gonna scan you tomorrow, your brain tomorrow, then Omega's gonna predict what you'll do the day after that in the counterfactual mugging. Then Omega's gonna flip the coin and do the either pay you $1 million or now today. So you're going to get scanned tomorrow. Today you can still change your mindset, change how you're thinking. Suppose that you could make yourself more vulnerable to the mugging, so to speak. In other words, like currently, maybe Omega looks at you and is like, you know what? I cannot predict Kabir. And sorry, is that how you say your name?
Yeah, that's fine.
Kabir.
That's fine.
So Omega's like, I cannot predict Kabir, so I'm gonna just not even do the whole counterfactual mugging at all. If you could change your mindset so that you would be more vulnerable and more predictable, and more predictably that you would pay up if the coin came up tails. If you could do that, then I think you should, because then there's a 50% chance you'll pay $5 and a 50% chance you'll get $1 million.
In the case of a like 99% or like 100% predictor, yes.
Well, even if it's less.
I'm not sure, because it seems to me like that. I'm uncertain why, but it just gives me the feeling of like, okay, if you do this, then you're going to be vulnerable to be taken advantage of.
So if you can't tell what Omega is doing, then you're right that Omega could trick you. Like if it's possible for Omega to look to you like it's doing the counterfactual mugging, but actually what it's doing is
just taking $5 from you.
Then that's true. But that's sort of orthogonal. I think that's basically orthogonal to all the stuff about counterfactuals. Like, are you saying more like you don't believe that you could trust Omega? That's kind of fair.
Yeah, that's basically what I mean. Yeah, but like in rules of life, sometimes you have to like know that this is actually what's happening, and it's not something which looks like that, right? And you become much more vulnerable to things which look like that but aren't actually that. If you know this, but like, sure, if I knew that yes, this 100% is what's actually happening, and it's not just something which looks like that, then yeah, sure. But just I would say, like in real life, you don't actually know most of the time that this is what's happening, and instead it's like something.
So okay, I think that's a pretty fair objection, but it's not. Well, it may or may not be germane to there's a lot of lessons that one might want to draw from the counterfactual mugging. I don't think that objection should defeat those lessons, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I mean, if to directly address your objection, I guess I would say you can get into that knowledge state, but you're right that it's like a pretty specific thing. I mean, the kind of way that you would get into that knowledge state would be like you get to read Omega's code.
Okay, yeah.
Like you could imagine scenarios where you have good reason to believe that you've actually read Omega's code, and like it
just understood it.
It didn't get completely overwritten. Yeah, and you understand it, and furthermore, you understand it in a way that makes you have justified confidence that it's
sure. Yeah,
this rule.
Yeah. I mean, in that case, yeah, of course, yeah, I would. I just don't think that's very likely to happen. That really is about it.
I don't know. I think it sort of does happen with humans, actually. It's a pretty messy, in real life, it's pretty messy with humans. But anyways, like zooming out, at least for one of the main sort of lesson I'm interested here, the reason I was drawn to this in the first place for research in alignment is that it is telling us something, and it's very much a toy model, but I think it does succeed at telling us something about reflective stability. And I think reflective stability is extremely key to alignment, not in the sense that like if you understood it, then you would solve alignment, but more like in the sense where if you don't understand it, then you're just totally lost. What I mean by that is if you don't understand the circumstances under which a feature of a mind is or is not, or can or cannot be stable, like persist, like the mind keeps having that feature for a very long time or forever. If you don't understand when a feature is like very stable about a mind, then you don't understand, in particular, you don't understand even like what sort of thing of value is, or what sort of thing it is, what sort of feature about a mind could determine the long-term effects that the mind has on the universe. If the mind has some long-term effect on the universe, like something about the mind determines which particular way it makes the universe look, that thing about that feature of the mind is something that's stable. If it's not stable, then it's like getting modified or pushed around by other forces. Whatever those other forces are, those are the real things that determine what the mind eventually chooses to do with the universe. So if we want to understand what the mind eventually chooses to do with the universe, we need to understand what is stable about the mind, or some of these key things that are stable about the mind. We don't understand, and currently still, for 2 decades, we still don't understand what can be stable about a mind. So, and that's like a mind. So I would say a minor offshoot of that central problem is all this stuff about decision theory, logical uncertainty, blah blah blah. It's all an offshoot of that. Yeah.
Let me try to make an example to see if I've understood or not understood what you're saying. So like if we take this to like, say for example, human minds, and we see what the human minds seem likely to do to the universe within the next 10,000 years, it seems the most likely thing that we're going to be doing is unleashing some AGI or ASI, which is going to target the universe. And so it seems that in this case, like the reflective stability property of the human mind would be to create a randomly tiling agent. By randomly, I just mean like whatever like values it ends up with is probably going to be like semi-random, or like semi-random in terms of what we want. Like it'll be like I don't know, like wanting to do like some silicon chips or whatever, or predict some tokens or whatever it is, right? So it seems that. So does that make sense? Is that like have I understood things correctly or incorrectly, or am I missing something?
Kind of. I think that's
okay.
Basically, it's sort of on the right track, except it's a funny way. Like to me, I would more just say that that's an instance of humanity as a whole being currently not reflectively stable. But your analysis is still basically like you're correctly identifying that like the fact that we're unstable in the particular sense. I would say we're unstable in the particular sense that we're not like preventing ourselves from creating an AGI that takes over. And I would say, yeah, you have correctly identified that that's like the real thing that determines what our the collective mind or whatever, or set of minds that is humanity, our effect on the future of the universe is mostly mediated by just us accidentally making AGI, and then the AGI does that. So you've correctly identified that that's the determiner of our effect on the world. I would describe that as being reflectively unstable, sort of like how evolution is kind of reflectively unstable in that, you know, the fact like humans have taken over control of the future light cone from evolution in a sense. Yeah. And so, you know, if you're looking at Earth 100 million years ago or 10 million years ago, you're like, you want to describe it in terms of evolution. Now you don't. Now you want to describe it in terms of humans. And then if we make an AGI, now you don't want to describe it in terms of humanity. You want to describe it in terms of the AI.
Okay.
if we were more reflectively stable, then it would and we were avoiding doing that, but instead keeping control for like us, for humans or humanity or something, then you would want to start asking questions like, well, what do humans like in the long term? What do we want the world to look like? Do we want, do we still want to have love? And like, we probably still want to have love and fun and stuff like that.
Okay.
And so probably the future world will contain love and fun and other stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay. So in that case, so reflective stability is the property that the universe would have if the minds or algorithm or whatever, like, or process continued. Okay, let me see if I can try to. If that mind or process was able to continue optimizing in the way that it wants, then in what way the universe would change? That's the reflective stability property.
No, I wouldn't identify reflective stability with what the mind ends up doing with the universe. I would say they're related in that I think that if you can accurately describe a mind as having some particular long-term effect on the universe, then like that implies that there's something that's stable about the mind.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I also wouldn't say reflective stability isn't. It's not a property of a mind to be reflectively stable or not. There's sort of like any given feature could be stable about a mind, and the reflective part is like emphasizing like that a key thing that a mind wants to do is to change itself. Like you want to learn to think in new ways. You want to correct mistakes, including mistakes in like the deep. Like if you haven't invented Bayesian reasoning yet, you're probably doing something that reflects Bayesian structure if you're succeeding at understanding the world at all, because in certain contexts with certain background assumptions, you have to be doing something that's Bayesian in a sense. So it's not like you were completely non-Bayesian before you invented Bayesianism, but once you invent Bayesianism and really understand it, then you can go back and be like, oh, there's all these places where I was using a heuristic that was kind of Bayesian, but I can correct it and do even better by...
Is a mind changing its world model? It changing its mind?
Yeah, I mean, I'm taking... Well, we care... We have to have more distinctions here that we haven't theorized properly. Yeah, I mean, obviously, anything is a change. I mean, if you open your eyes, you've changed your mind by lighting up your visual cortex. Mm-hmm. But we view that as sort of less important, less deep or something. So I would say, broadly speaking, all of this stuff is changing your mind, but then there's things that are more relevant in terms of the discussion here, where it's like...
Yeah, I meant more in that sense, like, if the goal itself has not changed, but only the process of obtaining the goal has become more optimal, right? The reasoning process has become more optimal. Has the mind really changed? Has the driver really changed? If you've just found a more efficient vehicle, right? In this case, like going to doing Bayesian reasoning, has the mind really changed? Is that really changing the mind?
Well, when you're saying really, I guess you're appealing to like... Yeah, I mean...
To there being like some sort of central goals, set of values, etc., that kind of thing.
Right. I mean, it's almost tautological, I guess. If what we're trying to do is figure out what effect does the mind ultimately have, then yes. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that division you're making is not something that we know how to do currently.
I'm not saying. Yeah, I agree. I'm not saying that we do know how to do that. I'm just asking, like, would that also count as changing? Okay, cool.
That's a key problem to me, is that we don't understand. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry for interrupting. I'm just like interested in this stuff. Okay. So if you can identify, okay, cool. Cool. So we went to talk about decision theory. In terms of like what you were working on, so what problems is it that you were trying to solve? Like if suppose you say, okay, like in the year, like between the year, like when you were like actively working on the problems, like what was your goal? Like what were you trying to specifically find out, and how?
Well, so there's, I guess very coarsely, there's two phases of my research. One is like that 2015 to 2020-ish blob, or 2019 or something, where it's sort of more focused on logical uncertainty and decision theory. There, I guess, trying to do like formal analysis of, I mean, it's all about reflective stability, but that's sort of like an approach that's trying to use like mathematical toy models, where you have, the nice thing about probability and decision theory is that you have some seed of like fully rich like mind or agency. Like if you have like a proof search, that's sort of like, in a sense, is like extremely powerful in general. It's like in principle, a proof search can like interact with like the whole universe of mathematical structure. And so if you can prove things about a proof search, that's cool. You've like proved something about this very highly general, fully general, metaphorically speaking, Turing complete thing. Like if you can prove something about Solomon-Off induction, that's another example. Or like in decision theory, we're trying to prove things about like decision rules, where the decision rule might have as a module like, here's my theorem prover, or here's my very powerful, fully general, like probabilistic set of beliefs, like a logical inductor or something, or here's my huge, like infinitely powerful or very huge, very extremely powerful search through all possible plans or something. So decision theory and these probabilistic things, like logical uncertainty things, it's cool in that you sort of have a mathematical model of fully general reasoners or fully general agents, and then maybe you can show some things about them. So that's cool. That would be the appeal of that whole approach. That I came to think that whole approach is not great. And so I guess the second phase, like 2019 to 2023, 2024, would be still fundamentally about reflective stability, but more like philosophy of mind approach, trying to step back and, I don't know, like at least understand the difficulties better in a more direct way. Like why is it so difficult to even get a handle on any of this, and like at least describe the obstacles better. Sorry, you can ask a further question.
Yeah. So why did you come to? I also want to understand more precisely what exactly you're working on, like in like the 2015 period, like 2015 to 2019 kind of period. I think have I gotten the dates right? 2015 to 2019.
Yeah,
that's when you were cool. Okay, so you're trying to do stuff on reflective stability using toy models and using probability theory and decision theory. Can you tell me like what kind of toy models were you trying to use to solve what kind of problems within reflective stability?
Well, the best answer to this is like look at the various papers, I guess.
Okay.
I can send you some links.
Sure.
I mean, it's going to be things of the flavor of like counterfactual mugging.
Okay, sure, that's fine.
There's all sorts of other things, like there's the open source game theory stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all. Another sort of example would be agent simulates predictor.
Decision theory. But have you shared or published like any like notes on this stuff as well?
Yeah, there's several like old things.
Okay.
Yeah, I can send you links, I guess.
That'd be great, thank you. So counterfactual modeling, open source decision theory. What was the other one you said?
Well, a particular example is agent simulates predictor.
Okay, agent simulates predictor. Okay. Okay. Actually, could we start with like what was the first one of these which you looked at, and what did you try to do on it?
The first one. Sorry. Yeah, these questions are.
Okay.
Well, again, this is like 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe not. Like maybe not the first one. But what? Yeah.
To a significant extent, I view these things as being less useful.
Okay. What do you think was the most important problem which you were looking at? And can you describe the process of trying to solve it?
I don't know. I mean, unfortunately, I think that it's like in retrospect, it's not that important, basically.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Cool. No, that's fine. I can move on then.
I can try harder to answer your question, but yeah.
That's fine. Do you think it's mostly not important because like these are too hard problems to be looking at, or these are the wrong problems to be looking at?
More that it's the wrong problems to be looking at.
Okay.
Although that's related to the overall problem being very difficult. Like the methodology that was to some extent being followed is the broadly sort of the scientific kind of methodology where you're like looking for anomalies and then trying to understand the anomalies, and the mathematical approach where you're trying to find the simplest version of the problem that you still don't fully understand, and then working on that, and then trying to solve that, and then finding the next simplest. This kind of makes sense if either you don't have a particular goal in mind, or the particular goal that you do have in mind is not that hard, or is somewhat well characterized. Like if you are doing like a programming project or something, you might like roughly know like the main parts, and you're sort of like, well, here's one of the parts that seems like hardest, where I'm not sure if I will be able to do it, and then you like work on a toy version of that, and you make a proof of concept, and you're like, okay, cool, now let's make a proof of concept of this other thing, and then you keep doing this process, and you flesh out the whole thing, and you find out, you update your picture of the overall structure, but the whole time you kind of roughly had most of the pieces or something. This is not, the current situation from my view is not at all, with alignment, is not at all like that. Like, according to me, we're like totally in the dark about how minds work, and in particular about what about a mind determines the long-term effects of the mind. And so, approaches where we, I don't know, it just doesn't work to like do this thing of like of street lighting, basically, like looking under the street light, like starting with what we can see fairly clearly, and then working out from there, trying to resolve anomalies. I think that is probably just too slow. I think it would work eventually. I think it just might take a extremely long time. Like that, like it's my get, like very, very vaguely, I would guess that that's on this, trying to do the, street lighting approach of starting with what we fairly well understand, working out to anomalies, building up our general knowledge, and expanding further and further into anomalies. That whole approach to understand enough about minds using that approach might be very roughly, this is totally a conjecture or guess, but it might be sort of on a comparable scale as like the whole scientific project since the Enlightenment up until now regarding, say, biology. It's like biology is extremely complicated, but it's finitely complicated. You can understand it. There are principles. There's tools that we're building up. We're gaining insight into DNA and regulation of DNA and like evolutionary pressures and evolutionary dynamics and all this stuff. soon, like in the next, whatever, 50, 100, 500 years, if we proceed as we're proceeding, humanity will understand biology at like a quite deep and facilitous level. Like we'll be able to do a lot of magic stuff. I mean, we can already do a fair amount of magic stuff. So I would say that like minds are kind of like, in a very zoomed out cosmic sense, like of a comparable scale of complexity and difficulty of understanding as biology. And so the project of understanding minds in this general approach would take that long.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've definitely gotten a similar feeling when looking at a lot of like Age Foundation's work, but it seems like it's trying to like pick away at a glacier with a chisel, kind of thing. Yeah, so that makes sense to me.
I mean, to be clear, I would apply that to everything else that I've seen so far in the whole alignment field. So, not particular to Age and Foundations.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. Okay. And so, like, you think, so let me just make a quick, so like, where I'm coming from in the later period is that I'm like, current AI systems are not real minds. So looking at them doesn't really tell you that much. Brains, like animal brains, animals are interesting. It's not clear whether you want to view them as minds, but actually our access to animal behavior and minds is not that good. That also extends to humans in terms of external observation, like looking at other humans, either their behavior or scanning their brains. Both of those things, like behavior is just there's not that much collected data, and it's sort of hard to assess and sift through because you need to like understand the context of each human, and behavior is just a very filtered view of what's going on inside the mind. And then in terms of brain scans, it's just our brain scans like suck, and even if you had good brain scans, there would still be a really major difficulty, like basically the interpretability problem, but for human brains, where you're not really viewing things at the right level of abstraction if you're looking at brain scans, like neurons firing and whatnot. So really the only access we have to minds is introspective access, which sounds a little bit woo, I acknowledge this, but I think it's correct. I think basically the best way that we have access to minds currently for actually understanding what's going on is introspective access on our own process of thinking and agency. So that is one piece of my general approach. Yeah. I think this makes a lot of sense to me.
It's very controversial. I think most people would not agree with this.
Yeah. It's also something which I don't say a lot because I think that's why I think like stuff like the Upanishads and so on, like religious texts which have persisted for a very, very long time are quite useful to look at for this kind of stuff, because I think firstly they were able to access this for a very long time and iterate on it a lot in environments where iterating on it was useful and like was rewarded, etc.
Yeah, I think that's like as good or better of a bet. I don't know much about the Upanishads, but like I believe that that's as good or better of a bet than like looking at brain scan data or looking at LLM activations or similar things.
I specifically say the Upanishads rather than something like say the Quran or Talmud, etc., because unlike those, the Upanishads was not written down for a long time. It was passed down by word of mouth, meaning that it had to pass through minds in order to be passed down, rather than being passed down on paper. So like it could be forgotten, and I think the ability to be forgotten is important for like accurate philosophy of the mind, if that makes sense. Because if it's not useful in some way, and there's some other like philosophy which is also forgettable, then the more useful one tends to be the one which is less forgotten. That's my theory, at least.
Well, a lot of the Torah, both the Torah and the I think the Talmud also was an encoding. It was a codification of an oral tradition.
Yeah, absolutely. And so like that previous oral tradition before it was written down, I would say that's valuable to look at. But like after it's been written down, I think it's there still is an element of like it's still being passed down and kept written, and that written form being preserved, etc. That still is a filtering effect, but I think it's a less powerful filtering effect than being passed down through the spoken word. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. It seems quite plausible. I'm not totally sure I buy. Well, so like for example, okay, I'm not educated about any of this stuff, but
that's fine.
My vague sense is that the Iliad and the Odyssey, like Homeric texts, were also passed on for a long time orally, and they don't necessarily seem to encode so much psychological knowledge. But
maybe I don't know much about the Iliad or the Odyssey, unfortunately.
I guess I suppose I'm saying I'm putting this forward as like a kind of example, some very strong version of your claim that.
I think that at some point they were written down quite early on. Mostly, I say this because I know about Socrates complaining about the written word. And I think this was like I think the Iliad was actually around the same time or after. I'm not 100% certain, but if she wants to, let's see, Iliad. Time. So when was okay, so it was written down in late 8th or 7th century BC. So oral tradition. Yeah, so it had an oral tradition and then was written down in 8th century BC. So like I'd say like so similar. I'd say with the Talmud, Torah, Quran, etc. But like, yep, if it had continued on like and not being written down and continued like being passed on purely orally, then I think it would have evolved into something that would have more sort of that kind of thing. That's a really interesting idea. I'd be interested in seeing if there are like more sort of like story and entertainment type things. If you persist with that long enough through an oral tradition, do you end up with something like the Gita or the Upanishads, etc.? Obviously, the Upanishads at some point were written down again, and then they similarly had a like stagnation effect, like the Quran, the Torah, etc. But it seems to me that just because it was written down later, has stagnated less, or like been through more filter. But I wonder if there's tribes or something maybe. But it seems to me like if you have small tribes, you have less competition of ideas. And so the filtering effect is less just because you have less of a competition of ideas. That's just like stuff I had for that. Cool. I generally...
So like I mean, I guess generally, like I would say things that are, things that are generated by an attempt or an intention to do anything spiritual or introspective in like a careful, progressively accumulating way will be as interesting from an alignment perspective as in terms of data or in terms of like a way into accessing the relevant variables. It'll be as interesting or more interesting than things that are often considered as being more relevant, like LLM activations or similar.
Yeah.
Just because that's our best access to human minds. Yeah. But I think the real way to access it is to learn how to do introspection yourself on your...
Oh yeah, absolutely. I do. I 100% agree with that. Like, I think like if you don't actually like, if you read the Upanishad and you don't actually have the introspection, you're not going to understand it. Like, right. I still would not say I understand the Upanishad, but I understand like maybe 2-3 lines from it. Those lines took me like a few months to understand. The Upanishad is quite short. It's like 15 pages in total. But I think that's just because it's extremely dense. But anyways, I'm not going to just talk about Upanishads for ages. So in terms of like, so the introspection and stuff, I'm curious what you mean about the brain scannings. I'm curious about 2 things there. One, what you mean about specifically about our brain scans not being good? Do you mean generally like some specific about fMRI scans being too noisy, or for example, or like there's a specific blocker in like denoising fMRI scans. Like, do we just not have good enough? I think it's computational reinforcement theory, like, or something. I forget what it is for. There's a thing that's been used for denoising fMRI scans. So you might know that better than I do. Okay, sorry. Is there a specific thing in that which is a blocker, or what do you mean from extrapolating from brain scans to behavior? What you think is a blocker there as well?
I'm not sure I understood the second part, but basically, I'd say basically both. I would say my understanding is that you're not getting like very, very high resolution in both space and time. Like you can get high resolution in time, but very low resolution in space using, I guess, fMRI, and you can get very high resolution in space, but only a small amount of data if you have like implants, like electrodes implanting, and then you can get, like if you wanted to, I think the brain scans are just not that good. And then, but I don't know if that's even a crux. I would more say that more likely to be a crux. Well, I don't know. I don't know what it would look like if we had really, really, really detailed brain scans. But I think it would be very difficult to learn how minds work from like, I have a whole post sort of like outlining the analogy here, but basically, like I would say it's okay. Well, the analogy I give in the post, which I can send to you, is imagine that there's some like algorithm. Do you know what a hash table is?
Not really. No. What's a hash table?
Well, have you like programmed in Python or something?
Yeah, but my programming skills are absolutely terrible. I'm just looking up what a hash table is.
So, like, if you use a dictionary in Python, you can kind of assign values to keys, and you can use kind of any key.
Yeah, I know what a key value pairs are. Yeah.
So the access to that is very fast. And the way you're doing that is, you know how to compute you have a way of computing the memory address from the key. Anyway, sorry, I don't need to go into detail. There's some way that you set up the way of storing the key value pairs. It's not super complicated, but there's definitely some complications, and it's interesting. It's not like immediately obvious. You don't just automatically do it. You have to think about it. So there's some idea, some algorithmic idea that maybe you're not familiar with. That's good for this example. Is there a simple algorithm that you kind of are familiar with, like maybe merge sort or insertion sort or something?
Binary search.
Yeah, binary search. Perfect. So those are two examples you could keep in mind. So now, suppose that you're looking at you're trying to learn about this algorithm. You don't know this algorithm, imagine.
Okay.
And then you're trying to learn the idea of the algorithm, but the only way you're allowed to do it is you're allowed to watch the RAM activation, the RAM of a computer. There's a computer that's running a bunch of stuff, and one of the things it's running is this algorithm, and you get to watch some chunks of RAM, or maybe the whole RAM or something. And now you're trying to learn the idea of the algorithm from that.
Okay. Do you not think we can say, like, okay, you can have people report what they're feeling, and then look at what information we have from scans, and people report what they're thinking, and then have the information from scan and have like a lot of that data lined up? Do you think that also doesn't work for a reason?
Well, work to do what?
As in to understand the human brain and how the human brain is working, what algorithms and stuff the human brain is operating on. For example, like what makes people like make a moral decision, what makes people have a moral value, what makes it like how like which part of the brain is doing that, how it's doing that, etc. If you get a lot of data from people, like how they're thinking of this, and what their brain looks like when they're thinking of this, etc., when they're processing this decision, and they then also say, this is what I'm thinking about, this is the decision I would make, like, etc. Like, you present them with like, lots of ethical dilemmas.
Well, you definitely
get lots of... Yeah, sorry.
Okay, I feel like I'm going to say some sort of like very abstract things that aren't that interesting, but they do seem like the relevant things to say. So you're going to learn, you're definitely going to learn something, right? You'll learn some interesting things. I think you will not learn what we need to know in our context, where our context is alignment theory and understanding how minds work. Like, you're not going, so like an example of a key thing. I'll give an example of a thing that I think is just one example of a thing that's probably key to understanding human minds in the context of alignment theory, and also is something that would not really show up in the data. So the example is, if you struggle with a problem that you're having, you struggle with it a bunch, like on the scale of minutes and hours. Like, you might spend half a day working on it and like thinking about different aspects, trying different things, like backing up and trying a different approach, learning about some details about it, whatever. So you've struggled with the problem, and then you like still didn't solve it, but you struggled, and then you wait a day or two, something happens in the background of your brain, or maybe it's a week or a month, and then you come back to it and you think about it in a different way, like some things have changed about how you think about it, and now you have some kind of insight like things, and then you make more progress, you have maybe new concepts or something. Whatever that process is, like, I would say, first of all, it's important for understanding minds, and it has implications for alignment probably. And second of all, is not something that you would be able to easily report on if asked.
Okay. That makes sense. And this is, I think, also assuming in a scenario that, I don't know, you've had a person hooked up to some kind of, like, they've been wearing some kind of cap which is scanning their brain, and somehow we have, or they have an implant or something, and we can actually get high enough resolution from that somehow, and they're able to also have the ethical dilemmas for weeks and months. But yeah, they're not going to be able to report while they're sleeping.
Yeah, so if you record that, so like the type of thing that I would vaguely, unconfidently expect would be, yes, you can learn something. For example, you could learn you can predict, given a brain scan, you can predict, is the person currently going through a process of cooking ideas in the background, or are they not going through that process? That's the sort of thing you might learn. Or you might learn, like, even quantitatively, like they're cooking on an idea in the background and it's a really tough idea, or it's a medium tough idea. You might learn something like that, but you're not going to like really get a detailed insight into like, here's how pre-existing implementations of values in the brain are algorithmically interacting with new knowledge and skills. You're not going to get that. Yeah.
Do you think if you can like say, okay, we identify this is the part of the brain which is most active during that period, and then here's what we know just physically about that part of the brain, and then we're going to try to guess how that might look like in math and code, and try to make a few different variations of that, and try to see which one of those seem to work and scale. Do you think that also would not like tell us useful things? And if the answer is no, it wouldn't, I want to know that. Sorry, I don't know if that made sense.
I didn't understand the very last part. I think
cool. Yeah. So if we obviously, like, just getting this data itself is very hard. But suppose we get the data somehow, and then say, okay, we've isolated which part of the brain is doing this, and we understand the physical structure of this brain because we've done autopsies, right? We've done like lots of forest scans on this part of the brain, and so we know based on that here are some ideas that we have for how this could be working in math and code, right? What we could think could be the structure of this, what we think could be the logical structure of this part of the brain. And then we try to actually implement that and see if it works when, like, in toy model stuff, and then if that scales, right? Maybe we try to implement some AI architecture or something with that and see if they scale and work as we want, if they actually seem to be resulting in the kind of like ethical decision making of kind that we want, and maybe also paired out some interpretability. Do you think this general approach would also not work? And if so, why?
Work to do what? Work to make something that is a mind at all, or work to make something that's a human, or that's making ethical decisions?
Work so that we find out how to make a mind that makes ethical decisions in the way that we want. As in, like, because like some of these approaches will work, because these are like general like ideas that we have based on this.
Okay, so
and one of the ideas will work, one of them won't.
In this hypothetical, do you already know how to make a general intelligence, or?
No, this is not. This is like saying, okay, suppose like in 3 months' time from now, we get a bunch of like funding to do these kind of scans, or we manage to collect a bunch of data which gives us information like similar to the scans. We isolate the part of the brain where this is happening, and then we say, okay, here's what we know about the structure. And then we get a bunch of like theoretical computer scientists together, and have them look up here's some potential architectures, how we could represent this. Most of those architectures don't work, don't actually scale, don't actually like make something coherent. But some of them seem to make something coherent. Then we do some interpretability on those architectures and see, okay, it seems like these two architectures are working to have some kind of AI in the way that we want.
I mean, one place I'm getting stuck is just, I think a lot of the important stuff will only make sense in the context of a whole mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know whether to, in your hypothetical, to imagine that there is a whole mind, maybe we scanned the whole brain and we're uploading the whole brain, or we're doing a hybrid thing that you're describing where we try to scan the brain, we can't make a full upload, but we can sort of make a computational, like we are using machine learning or some other method in the background to like fill in the gaps of what we don't know about how the brain works.
I mean, like in terms of I'm talking about in terms of say ethical decision making, we know that it's mainly the prefrontal cortex which is responsible in that. And it seems that it's either like the mixture of like prefrontal cortex and the amygdala/hippocampus, right? And so we can say, okay, we then identify it further by getting much more data, maybe over like longer time period as well. Like you said, something which they're thinking about for like months and weeks and stuff. And then we know that, okay, in all of these times, these are the specific parts of the brain which are the most active, especially at night and especially before and after they've had like an ethical breakthrough.
Right.
And we identify, okay, before and after ethical breakthrough, these are always parts of the brain which are the most active. And so then we use that to make
so right up until now I'm with you. You could plausibly do something like that.
Cool. And then we say, okay, these are parts of the brain, and we think that this is. So then we say, okay, we think the amygdala. I'm just going to use the amygdala as an example here. We think the amygdala works like this, right? This is how we think, like the general like circuit or process of the amygdala works. Based on that, let's try to make a few different AI architectures, right? And make those architectures responsible for reasoning or even like for the main thinking process in an AI, right? Whether that be with an element of diffusion, whatever. Like we tried, or maybe like just have some like by themselves, so just that process, try to make that process into some kind of intelligence, right? Maybe you try 40, 50, 100 different architectures based on that.
Okay.
Most of those architectures don't actually work to make anything coherent. Maybe 20% of them, or 5% of them are somewhat coherent. And of those 5%, maybe 2% seem to be actually producing the outputs that we want. And of those, we maybe do some further like study and test on them, maybe do some interpretability as well, and see, do they seem to be internally, from what we can understand from the activations, from the parameter decompositions, do they seem to be reasoning through the process in the way that we want? And then we look at, okay, yeah, this is the one that seems so far to be reasoning about the process in the way that we want. Then we see, okay, now let's look at the architecture of this and figure out why is this the one which worked.
I'm still not sure I'm following, but let me say two major problems that I would expect you to run into. First major problem is you're not going to be having the correct thing even be in your hypothesis space. In other words, if you wrote down 100 architectures, none of them would be the right thing, or even close enough. Second problem would be, I still don't know how you're actually getting the feedback. Like you said, well, you check if it is having the outputs that you want, and you're checking if it's internally reasoning in a good way, but neither of those things are things that we would be able to judge. Like, you wouldn't, like our brain scans, I don't know whether you're assuming some of this away, which is why part of why I was squinting, but like like maybe you're trying to assume this away and just maybe you're assuming like, well, we have perfect brain scans or something, but
no, I'm not assuming that at all.
So if we don't have perfect brain scans, then you don't know either what the inputs or the outputs are to this module. You're like, well, there's the prefrontal the amygdala or some area of the prefrontal cortex or something, that was supposed to like the inputs to this are like some background context that was going on in a bunch more of your mind, where it's like the whole the situation and all the considerations that go into that situation and all the pieces of understanding that you need in the background to even understand the situation at all. And then the output is like, now I'm doing a bunch of stuff differently with my frontal cortex, but that is being applied to other brain areas where it's like, I'm directing my attention differently. I'm moving my eyes differently. I'm paying attention to different things, or I'm applying some different criterion to whether I understand something or not. Like maybe I'm like, oh, I realized that I didn't understand the other person's experience, and now I need to like have a higher standard for whether or not I've understood the situation, which is I need to be able to empathize with the other person or whatever. And this is going to affect a whole bunch of other brain systems. And so to understand whether you got the output you wanted, you'd have to somehow understand the implications of these outputs, which would, naively, that seems to me like you'd have to kind of understand the whole rest of your brain, or like large parts of the rest of your mind, right? Because you need to know what it means that you've changed some patterns of attention and criteria of success for other parts of the brain.
Cool, that makes sense. My instinctual reaction to that is to like get a lot of self-reported data, like before and after, like have like say maybe daily 1 hour calls with the person, ask them how they're thinking, how they're feeling, etc. And if you get this with enough people, and enough like a large demographic, large time, then you won't have the actual inputs and outputs, but you'll have some knowledge of some of the data, which is leading, which is like 10, 20 steps, or maybe like some number of steps before the input, and then you have some data which is like some number of steps after the output. And if maybe you don't necessarily have like those actual inputs and outputs, but you have a lot of data which is like for what like representing stuff before and after the inputs and outputs, then maybe you can use that data to predict what the inputs and outputs were. Does that make sense?
I mean, I guess it makes sense, but I feel like it's very filtered. It's very emanations of emanations, or it's very so I'm going to make up an example right now. It might not work out, but like imagine that you're looking at the RAM activations for a computer. You're supposed to understand some algorithms like the hash table or the binary search, but now, well, you sort of gave up on, or you're not necessarily trying to directly understand those, or maybe you are, but the main way you're gathering data is that you are getting reports from the computer. You're getting logging reports for how quickly various applications ran. You're like, when I turned on my browser, like before someone like went in and optimized the hash table code, before my browser took like 0.5 seconds to start up on average. Now it takes 0.45 seconds to start up on average. And then it's like, and you look at that for various computer programs in various contexts. In principle, yes, if you have enough data, in principle, you could be like, well, given these contexts and given in theory the functional role of a hash table and given my guesses about which different programs in different contexts will require storing key value pairs to a greater or lesser extent or with a different distribution of key value pairs or sizes, that implies a different amount of load on the key value pair storage algorithm, and therefore like thinking about what sort of modification they may have made, like I can imagine different ways of doing key value stores, and now and then like I do more theory to figure out a possible way that this key value store is implemented as an algorithm, which would explain the pattern of different programs becoming faster or slower or performing differently before and after the change. It's like, yes, in principle you could, but it's a very, very filtered, it's a very like third-hand, filtered isn't the right word. I'm struggling to, it's very mediated.
It's very abstract. Yeah, no,
not necessarily abstract. It's just very mediated. It's like you're seeing like third-hand effects of the change, and it's very hard to like invent an algorithmic idea by observing these third-hand changes. I mean, that's sort of how science works, but I feel like the way science works is you go a single level. You like we only got the atomic theory. Like the atomic theory was invented.
I'd say this is more like doing economics and science.
And economics is kind of
very fuzzy, very wrong a lot.
You could probably do it better by tracking.
Yeah.
But
that makes sense.
That's a good example of economics. Yeah, it's like trying to understand like the implications of a particular tax policy by looking at like GDP of a country. It's like
there's a bunch of things which go into that. Like the reason that we use GDP is that because GDP is easy to track, so we end up like just having metrics based on how easy they are to get rather than whether they're actually good to get.
Exactly.
And so like similarly like this, we're getting this because it's easier to get this, not because it's actually good to get. Okay. I basically agree with everything you said. My only one push-up is like it seems that sometimes we do succeed in like, even though we have terrible metrics like just GDP per capita, sometimes we can use those to predict the like in 10 years time this is going to be the tax policy of the country, because we have a whole bunch of data for lots of countries and lots of history, but that's data which we don't necessarily have. Like, no, it's not. We just don't have for the brain and the mind.
Kabir, let me.
Sorry.
Let's just take a short break. I can.
Your research in 2019, 2023, 2019 to 2023, that kind of thing. So you're saying, so you went to more of a philosophy of minds approach, and thinking of like still reflexive stability, but you're trying to think of like just understanding minds better and stuff, right? Can you talk to me more through that? What that process was like? What specifically you're trying to figure out there? What were the questions that you had, and how you're trying to solve them?
I will try. I think mostly it's not going to be satisfying answers. I think I didn't meet with much success. I wrote a bunch of stuff, which you can see on my blog or on Less Wrong. Mm-hmm. I had various ideas, but like it's more kind of circumspect, like kind of trying to clarify the problems, clarify some obstacles, point at like directions where we haven't explored. Like the whole spiel that I was giving about like why various approaches aren't great. There are like various sources of data. That's something that I had to come to by thinking of, like I tried to read about ethology, like science of animal behavior, and spent some time on that and was like, okay, actually, this isn't a good source of data. And anyway, so to more directly answer your question, actually, I don't know how to answer the question. I mean, I can give examples of like a few ideas I had. I can give.
Actually, I think what might work a bit better is, when you were working on this, could you walk me through what would you do during a day?
Just kind of think. Sorry, yeah, it's yeah, think. I mean,
just chronologically, like it doesn't have to be like an abstraction something. Just chronologically, what you do
in a day.
Yeah, like obviously, like there's like the brushing your teeth, whatever and stuff like that's. But I mean, like you sit down, you're at your computer, or like at sort of a. What do you actually do?
I guess it's a mix of walking around and thinking on my own, talking to a few collaborators, like arguing with them about what approaches make sense. I guess some mentorship, like mentoring other people, and then trying to write things. Like I guess an approach that I would take with writing was to try to discuss things with people, so either mentees or collaborators, and then when there's something that I think is important that other people don't get clearly, or that I find myself explaining a lot, I try to like back up and write that thing down, or even write up prerequisites to explaining that thing. Like things where I would, like, if I notice that I have an opinion that seems to me to be important regarding what whole, like, general directions in research should and should not work, or should either clearly don't have a chance, or on the other hand might have a chance. If I see something where being on the same page with someone else about that is getting stuck on some concept, then that's salient to me. I'm like, I should explore this concept more. Maybe I'll update and change my mind about whether that's a key concept. Or if not, I'll write it up clearly, and then I can, like, at least it's written up somewhere, I can understand it better and use it better in conversation, or maybe point people to what I've written up. Sorry, this is a very, like, process level answer, but...
No, that's exactly what I want. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, cool. That's great. Awesome. Okay, so cool. So this is right. I want to ask. So when you say walking around and thinking, what would be kind of like your thought process? What would you be thinking about? That kind of thing. If you can elaborate, just like in a similar, like, some process way.
That's hard. I think, well, a thing that I maybe is a little uncommon that I do that might be important is I worry about describing it because it sounds like dumb or something, but we'll see if I can. Okay, the first way I can describe it is it's a meditative sort of thing, but I worry that's a very misleading way of saying it. I do not mean that I was meditating or introspecting on, like, my feelings or experience or something. What I mean is more like staring at something external. Like if you see a tree that is weirdly shaped or something, you might, like, just kind of stand and be like, how did it become shaped that way? But you're not necessarily, like, listing through hypotheses or, like, trying to think of other trees that look the same way. You're not necessarily doing I mean, those are things you could do too, that you should do. But you might just be like staring at it to like try to see it more, like notice more, like, oh, like, you know, it's curving around the metal bar of the fence or whatever, or like, oh, I noticed that like the branch doesn't actually join back up after the split, or maybe it does. It looks like it does join back up, or you focus on like the interface between the two branches. You're like, did they actually join back up, or what's happening? Or, like even just trying to understand what's happening, I guess, like backing up from like trying to hypothesize or fit things in to other things, or trying to think about how to experimentally test something or how to apply it, whatever. Like that's all sort of very down the line. I would like try to back up and just stare. So like, how do humans make deep intellectual progress? You know, like, people focus on the things that are legible about that. Like they might look at like economic conditions that make things, or like social economic conditions that make things more amenable to progress. Or they might look at like, you know, Kuhnian, like sociology of science, like whatever. But I'm more interested, or you can say sort of like course level things, like Hadamard might put in his description of like, oh, well, the incubation thing, like you think about it a lot and then you wait and it incubates in the background and then you try again and you have insight or whatever. This is very coarse, but I'm more interested in like
the high level.
No, I'm more interested. Well, no. I'm interested in. Well, one thing here to be interested in is just like actually getting to the engine of things. Like none of the things I listed are talking about like the actual engine of innovation, like what mental operations are happening. And you can also say useless things about mental operations. You could be like, well, you know, you need to like have the data available, which is true, it's relevant, but like when you're thinking about it, I don't know, there's also like cliche things to say, like, well, you're doing clustering or you're like coming up with hypotheses and testing them, whatever. But like, there's things that happen that seem important, like coming up with new concepts, for example, is like a very weird thing that happens that we don't understand. And so I don't.
Oh, okay. It actually sounds like very much like, I don't know how much you know about like there were Hindu philosophers who try to understand like how the mind worked, not in the sense like in a woo-woo like God and stuff kind of way, but in the sense of like which kind of, for example, like mindset works best for being more moral, right? Which kind of thought process and things to think about, like if you think these things and do these things, then you're more likely to say, be a good king, right? And be a just king, right? And why? How do you identify when a child is going to grow up to be a just king or not, right? What kind of philosophy should they have? What kind of like worldview should they be for? Like these are all like too high level. It's more like it's like, how do you think through problems in order to be someone who is just, right? How do you think through problems? Like, how do you look at a person? Like, what kind of like, this kind of person looks at people in this way, this kind of person looks at people in that way. Which kind of like people viewing like process leads to more ethical or more wise decision making, right? It sounds a lot like those kind of things. Am I getting this correctly, or is this not quite?
It's hard to tell from what you said so far. Okay. It sounds pretty interesting. I think the issue, well, what you said made me think of something, which not necessarily directly answering your question, but I think an issue here is that probably my guess would be that most of the most important stuff is shared between all humans. And so what that, in particular, an implication of that is that looking at differences in behavior or performance between different humans does not reveal the shared stuff. It doesn't reveal the core mechanisms. It's like in genetics. If you look at variation there is genetic variation between humans. It does affect all sorts of traits, but the most important things, the most interesting things, are like all the conserved genes that every human has the same thing, unless you have like a disease mutation, and those. So you can't necessarily discover the functions of those things by looking at differences between humans who have genetic differences in those things. There is an answer that like proteins do some particular function, but it's just not necessarily a good way to get at it by looking at differences.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't really communicate that well, because what I should have communicated was that the reason that they would look at those things and so on, the reason they would think about mine stuff would be because they would say like, there is like, I'll actually just quote the Upanishads there because they'll obviously Vyasa did a better job than I did. They say like, as there is oil in seeds, as there is fire in wood, etc. He had a bunch of things to go on to say. So too there is there's, what do you say? There's like some spirit in man or something. Saying that there's like some inherent like thing which is, even if like it's not visible, even if it's not perceived, it is there. And this is like, you talk about like this Atma or something being there, and that's like the key thing. And like whenever like they talk about, you know, looking at these behavior stuff, it'd be to bring that out and to more accurately act according to that. As in like you're more accurately acting on your values and stuff, not just your value, like that inherent like empathy and goodwill, etc., that is inherent in humans, more accurately acting in that, being more sort of in sync with that, rather than being muddled up. Like, yeah, that's actually like a very common thing. Like, I mean, not just in terms of like so in general, but just like the idea that when you're being immoral, it's because you are muddled up in things and not acting in line with like with like who you truly are, what your true like core is, and like the core of humanity is generally common, and good, that kind of thing. Which sounds, maybe I'm wrong here, but it sounds to me like the kind of thing which you're thinking about as well.
It sounds like a similar frame, yeah. But
okay, cool. Okay, so that's a hard problem. Yeah, considering like I consider like Vyas to be one of the like greatest geniuses who ever lived. And even though he
who?
So have you heard of the Bhagavad Gita? So Vyas was the author of the Bhagavad Gita.
Wait. Okay. I feel maybe this is a
This, I don't mean this like, when I say he's a genius, I don't mean this in like in a religious way, like he was some god or something. I just mean that he was a really smart guy who's very, very good at philosophy.
The reason I'm pausing is because I'm like, maybe I didn't try very hard to understand it. I just like listened to part of the Bhagavad Gita on whatever, but bro, like the thing, the speech to the guy, that's kind of fucked up.
Which speech? Which one? The speech to Arjuna?
Yeah, Krishna to Arjuna on the battlefield.
Yeah. In what way was it fucked up? Because he was telling him to go to war?
The part where he's like, look around, look at all the people arrayed here. Mm-hmm. Like your friends, your teachers, your compatriots, your family. You might think that you should avoid getting them all killed, but your duty is to go to war or something. I don't remember.
So
impression I got.
Yeah. So the Gita is actually like, so the Gita is part of the larger Mahabharata, and so that's within the context of there being a larger like story and stuff. And the like abstract sort of like thing behind that is that and this is my own very flawed understanding. I'm not claiming to fully understand the Gita. I don't. But within my flawed understanding, interpretation of the Gita would be that this is like, in a sense, like the voice of like the fire of morality, saying that even if something is difficult and even if something is painful, if it is right, if you know that it is what's right for your responsibilities, for your duty, then it's what must be done. Because in the scenario here, in like the reason why that battle was happening was because there were some like demons and stuff, some Rakshakas and stuff, and there was some side of his family had sided with the demons who were trying to take over and be tyrants over the country, over the world, etc. And Arjuna felt great despair at having to do battle with his family, with his brothers, with his friends, even if they were on the side of someone who was being a tyrant. And this was Krishna telling him, like, you need to choose between what is right for the world, what is right for the country, what is etc., and is what was right in terms of morality, rather than just the pain that you have right now. That is my flawed, incomplete interpretation of that part of the Gita.
Okay, yeah, if that's roughly right, then that does seem a lot less bad, or maybe correct.
Yeah. I also don't think that's really like. I think there's part like philosophy in there that's important, but I look at the Gita mostly as a philosophical text, okay. And as something like looking to understand the human mind and stuff, and not as like this is what you should do kind of thing. And I think for example like chapter 16 of the Gita, I think it like really accurately describes like the impulse and a certain kind of person who is like very selfish and wants things for themselves and wants more and more, etc. And I think does that very concisely and very precisely. And in general, I think it's just very accurate in that kind of way. I also don't think the Gita is even necessarily like Vyasa's like ultimate work. I think that's the Upanishads, which is also by Vyasa, or Vyasa compiled them. Right. Vyasa was a compiler of the Upanishads, so I talk about the Upanishads a lot.
Like Euclid.
Yeah, I don't know much about Euclid.
I think he wrote the elements. Right.
Stuff. Yeah.
But that was like a compilation of.
Yes, exactly.
Mathematical tradition.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, extremely similar to that. Yes. So yeah, Vyasa was the compiler, not the original author of all the stuff. I'm sure some of the stuff he did make, but the vast majority came. Yeah, but I think just doing a very, very good compilation is also a skill. And shows like taste and stuff. And I think the Upanishad is like much better work than the Gita, even though the Gita is still very, very good.
I guess sort of like the less wrong sequences as well.
Yeah, although I don't think the less wrong sequences are nearly as like signal dense as the Upanishads. But again, like the Upanishads, they went through a great filtration process. Which the less wrong sequences have not yet been through. I guess they're kind of going through it kind of now, but with less strong forces. Yeah, sorry, I got distracted again. So you do this meditative kind of way, abstract high level thing when walking around and thinking.
I mean, the reason I'm highlighting that is just that I feel like the vast majority of, well, given my data set, like. Mostly what happens when people try to address the hard problem of alignment is they just pretty quickly stop trying to address the hard problem of alignment.
Yeah.
And so my first recommendation, if you want to solve the hard problem, is to not stop trying to solve it.
I agree. That's why I'm trying to do the Moonshot program and stuff, which is going to be very flawed, but at least it's something. Okay, cool. Looking... so I'll just put here brackets, pad, tangent, about the Gita and the Upanishads again. Cool. And cool. So we're kind of thinking when you're talking to, okay. When talking to your collaborators, can you give like a process level description of
that? Well, with mentees, it would be we'd have a Google Doc open. Then I would kind of just ask them what's been on their minds, and they might like give an idea or a question or ask me about something I've said, or just bring up like a topic. Then I'll like say some stuff, and then they'll say some stuff. I mean, we'll sort of have a conversation, but then like maybe at some point I'll be like, oh yeah, here's like an important thing that you should understand. And then I'll type it out into the doc, and then,
okay.
Sorry, I don't know if this is, yeah.
That's fine. Cool.
If I'm talking to a collaborator, I mean, mostly I stopped trying to collaborate directly on research with people around, I guess, 2019, 2020-ish. Before that point, with like the Agent Foundation's team at MIRI, I spent a fair amount of time, I don't really remember like how much time, but definitely many hours, or tens of hours, kind of arguing with people about like what sorts of broad approaches to research are going to like get us to where we need to get for alignment. And not that it was a total waste of time, like we had interesting ideas and maybe influenced each other, but like broadly it didn't work in the sense that like I was not on the same page with anyone else about research taste and approach. So I kind of just was working on my own, but like I would still have conversations about ideas and philosophy and stuff with a couple collaborators, I guess mainly like Sam Eisenstadt. And the way that goes is like, I don't know, we just chat about whatever, and then sometimes we feel like talking about some philosophical question, and then Sam says some idea, and I'm like, I don't know, it's a normal philosophical conversation. Like, Sam says an idea, and I try to translate it, or give an example, or give a connection, or I critique it, and I'm like, well, but you're missing X, Y, Z, and he's like, no, you don't understand. It's already contained in my idea. Or, oh yeah, of course, oops, yeah, whatever.
Cool, makes sense. I think that's also covered the mentorship, trying to write things, discuss ideas with mentees. Cool. Then Vidas. Okay. Okay. I also wanna, if we have time, I'd also like to ask about the intelligence enhancement thing. But I think that's gonna be lovely. When coming to, like, if you see a new research idea, right, and they're genuinely like a new research idea, or a variation of a research idea, what is your kind of like process level thought process of identifying whether this research idea is going to be good or valuable or useful, that kind of thing, for alignment?
I guess that has sort of changed. Like maybe there's been sort of 3 phases, like in 2015 to 2018 or something, or 2018 maybe. I would be kind of trying to ask, like, is this on the path to answering some technical question that someone else has already posed? Like logical uncertainty or reflective stability, decision theory problem kind of thing. Then 2018 to 2020, very vaguely, I guess, or 2021, I would be thinking about, like, is this, does this seem like a novel approach to getting good information or good contact with what matters about minds? So this would include, I did some reading on neuroscience or comparative neuroscience between different animals. I did reading about evolution, evolutionary biology, as like, like evolution is, humans are the only example of a mind, of a general intelligence, but humanity as a whole, like the scientific community, and also evolution are two other examples of like strong optimization processes, even if they're not exactly minds or agents. So evolution would be a nice example of a strong optimization process. And I do still think that that's like a good source of like general growth or something, but turns out not such. But anyway, so my approach here in this period would be something like, is this a good way of getting into contact with minds? So this would, so as I mentioned, reading about neuroscience, reading about evolution, reading about animal behavior, ethology stuff. I suppose I would have also included interpretability and LLM interpretability stuff, but that was not quite. That stuff was only starting up during that time period. Then my third phase would be 2020-ish, 2021 to 2023-ish, or 2024, which there I would be asking, as I mentioned earlier, not necessarily like, is this kind of like solving the problem, but more like, is this supporting the mental motion for me and also for others of at least fixing our attention more intently on the actual problem and the actual confusions.
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat? So you said not is it solving a problem, but is it something?
Is it supporting the mental operation for me and for others of fixing our mental gaze more intently on the actual problem of alignment and the subproblem, the actual core subproblems, and the core like confusions or obstacles.
Cool. Cool. Awesome. Sweet. Makes sense. So you said that was 2021 to 2024. Has this changed again in 2025, or is it still the same? Like, is it supporting the mental operation of fixing mental gaze more intently on the actual problem of alignment or the core problems or subproblems?
Well, insofar as I'm doing anything involving alignment, that would be my main focus. But I'm obviously not. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Cool. We're unfortunately running into my time though, which is not great. But if you have time some other time, I would really love to continue talking. I feel like this is like one of the rare times I talk like someone who's like, who at least previously was doing foundations, who I actually like I feel like maybe it's just a mind, but I feel like thinking kind of in a similar way about some stuff, which is cool. I don't want to explore that further. So just in brief time we have, when you're doing the human intelligence enhancement stuff, can you tell me more about that?
Mm-hmm. So broadly, I want to give humanity more brain power, more philosophy power, for solving our problems. I think we can probably increase our intelligence, our problem-solving ability. There's a lot of good things that we should be doing that aren't the type of thing I would think about. Like, we should definitely get lead out of the pipes. We should definitely make information and education more available. We should definitely think about healing societies, like weird social emergent problems of like nihilism or attention being grabbed by dopamine, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff is important. Totally. People should be thinking about it. Seems important, seems high leverage, but that's not my approach. My approach is broadly like, let's do some sort of technological thing to have large effects on our cognitive abilities. Basically, I guess, because that feels higher leverage potentially. Like, it seems like a thing that one could do given a relatively limited amount of resources, or something. Like, there should be things that work. And so I thought about various approaches. I wrote a post, which I can send to you, on different approaches. So like BCIs or signaling molecules or whatever. I think most of them don't work and or are bad. I think
Is it overview of strong human intelligence amplification methods?
yes.
Cool. Oh, that's interesting.
I think the approach that should both be good and also really ought to work, like requires the least amount of like speculative belief about science or like biotech or something, is germline engineering. Of course, that has the two major downsides. One is that it's politically controversial, sort of, although less than you might think. And also there's it just has a long time delay, but I do have longer timelines than most people around here, so it still seems quite valuable on my views. Yeah.
Okay, that's a little bit surprising, but okay. I guess it makes sense given context. Okay. Cool. Sweet. I'm actually gonna have a read about some time because that's something I've been wanting to know more about. Cool. In terms of your view, like on, oh, sorry, I almost forgot. Just actually before I go into the human intelligence enhancement stuff, what do you, what do you think actually are the specific bottlenecks right now on that supporting the mental operation of fixing more intensely on the actual alignment problem? On that, what do you think are the specific bottlenecks?
Yeah, that's a tough question. There's probably multiple bottlenecks, honestly, like multiple things, all of which would have to be satisfied. I think to a large extent, people aren't trying to do that. There's one component of that would be it's not necessarily widely agreed. Like I've made a lot of claims here. I've made several claims here, which would not be widely agreed upon. So, for example, this whole view of like we're deeply confused conceptually and like we won't be able to make much progress using empirical methods or empirical tinkering. I think that whole viewpoint is minority. Wow. There's probably like a fair amount of support, unless wrong, because it's sort of a Miri-ish. It's a view sort of associated with Miri, maybe. But it's pretty controversial. A further issue is that it's sociologically bad. Like it's much easier to coordinate. It's much easier to collaborate and coordinate around like empirical sort of investigations. Like, yeah, like you get a team together with some of your friends or people you work well with and you like build stuff and you get to talk to people. But my approach is like do weird novel philosophy that like is hard to be motivated as a group together. Also hard to get funding for similar reasons.
The actual like ideal thing for this would be a temple, and having like that's a funny thing to say, but also I mean that unironically.
It wasn't taking you ironically.
And like because then you can actually like have just just the environment that yes, we are here to do philosophy and it's important and it matters, and there's a community who depends on you having a mind capable of good philosophy. And like if you regularly deal with people's ethical problems, and in order to be good at those things, you need to be good at philosophy. In my personal opinion, so I think that would be the actual thing. Actually, like part of what I did accidentally to become good at, to become less bad at this stuff, I would say, I was like doing like sort of like a lot of like online therapy for a lot of people for a long time. Accidentally got good at that, then ended up like going into like some philosophy stuff. And I think that kind of thing is just very useful and helpful in general. The spaces which are doing that, there's really not a lot about which are about nowadays. And it's hard. I think there's a desire for it, but it takes a kind of leadership to do that, which is much more profitable to spend that leadership doing a startup than doing that. Yeah. Okay. I don't know how much that makes sense.
I have trouble thinking about anything involving groups of people, like more than one person. Like like when you say that, I'm like, I don't know how to imagine. I'm not saying it's infeasible or impossible, but I'm saying like you wouldn't be able to get me on board until it was already existing and good, probably. Because
that's a very standard group theory thing, and like the way to get around that is just like just having Riz. Basically, what it is. It's just having Riz, being charismatic.
I mean, I think that like in practice, doing things by having Riz is going to get a shit version of the thing. Maybe I'm wrong.
If it depends. So if the person is like, okay, I want to do a thing, and I have Riz, and I will go do the thing. Yes, that ends up badly. But if the person is like, okay, I want to go listen and learn and like do a lot of like basically market research first, right, and really understand what's needed and understand what people want and what people need, and then have put the conviction, etc., towards that, then it leads to good things. Obviously, that process is much longer and much harder, requires much more humility, so it's much more rarely done. But I think when it is done, actually leads to rewards. And this is not just like in the philosophy stuff; it also just like in making products. Mm-hmm. When you do much more market research and have much more humility about that process and do what the market wants rather than what you want, it's more profitable, etc. And this just generally applies, including to philosophy.
Maybe I think even that approach sounds like it's this discussion is getting a little abstract because
but
I mean, I guess I would say like I don't know how to deal with this, and I don't know how to deal with this in the group context at all. Like I would sort of say, well, there's just going to be like several like impasses or like puns. I don't want to be too rude or dismissive, but
that's fine. You can be rude. It's fine. Yeah.
Do you know what a pons asinorum is?
A pons what? Sorry.
What's it?
No, I don't.
Hold on one sec. Let me just check that I'm using the right word. Yeah, pons asinorum. So this is a bridge. I think it means a donkey bridge.
Pons as the norm?
Asinorum. Pons asinorum. It's Latin for like bridge of donkey, bridge of asses, bridge of donkeys.
Bridge of donkeys.
I'll message it to you.
Okay. Okay, I'll find it. Cool. Let's see. Got it.
So yeah, like.
I think so. Just like people, like a bunch of like people like who are like low level in this and like not actually understanding it, telling each other that they understand it, and then that building on each other and stuff, and then giving like this overall like high level person who thinks they have a reasonable understanding because a bunch of other people are propped up their belief and stuff like this. Is that what you mean?
I think I'm saying something simpler. That's an interesting other failure mode. But I'm just saying there's going to be like to have a community that's getting work out of being a community in approaching a difficult problem. You want to have some background assumptions that are shared more or less, or like background criteria for progress or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this just becomes more and more difficult. I'll speak coarsely. This is going to be in place, but if we have a philosophical problem, which I would say alignment is a philosophical problem, that means that it's not necessarily less focused, but it is focused in a weirder way. So for example,
I mean, you're essentially describing the need for religion, right? Like,
I don't know about that. I mean, I would just say like
religion in the sense of like a shared applied philosophy.
It doesn't necessarily need to be applied. I think I'm making a somewhat more limited claim. I'm just saying like for example, reflective stability being my particular understanding of reflective stability as a central problem of alignment, I think is like a pons asinorum for being able to do alignment research. If you don't understand this, I don't mean you're an ass, but I just mean like,
it's a prerequisite.
I just mean you're thinking about alignment is going to going to be missing one of the many criteria that you would need to notice when your whole line of approach is like totally doomed to not be relevant at all. So that's already something where, like, if you just get a bunch of people who are kind of interested in the general idea of like introspection and doing philosophy on introspection and trying to do technical philosophy and conceptual analysis and apply that to alignment somehow, half of those people, or more than half, wouldn't understand the point about reflective stability, and then half of those, or like two-thirds of them wouldn't understand it, and then half of those would never understand it or would never agree with it.
Okay.
It's just in practice, which is fine. I mean, they shouldn't, in general, having a diversity of understandings is good or whatever. But like, if you're trying to get the juice out of having a big group, I just feel like it's so difficult because there's going to be all these like difficult abstract ideas that you want to be on the same page on in order to.
Yeah, I guess then you need, like, obviously this kind of thing building out was actually going to be hard, but I guess you need like a testing and filtering process which can be iterated on. Like, okay, we've discovered, like, suppose at some point some people in the group identify a point as a norm, like reflective stability, or maybe they'll identify another thing as well in addition to reflective stability, right? And I say, okay, going forward, in order for us to actually do philosophical work on alignment or do further work, we're going to need people who understand this, either people who understand this or who are capable of at some point understanding this. If we like detailing up for them, and people who are never going to be capable of understanding this, we need to filter those people out. They're not going to be useful
in theory, but I feel like in practice this will have bad effects and will fail to have the good effects you wanted. Like, you'll filter out good people who are sort of necessary for the project, and you will also accept people who are just not, or who are just like trying to repeat back the sentences that you want to hear rather than seeing it for themselves. In principle, what you're saying could work. I feel like if I tried to do it, even if I tried hard, I would fail. That's what I'm saying.
Cool, makes sense.
Anyway.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, cool. So that's the sort of philosophy bottlenecks and stuff. I'm actually going to think a bit harder about how I want to write that up, because this is something I've been thinking about for a while. On like, how do you actually build? Because like before I saw ChatGPT and stuff and go into alignment, I'm sorry, pretty obvious, but I was thinking about religion. I was planning to start a religion because I was looking at like how previous religions have failed, why they failed. I'd come to the conclusion that religion generally is something which is good when applied correctly, but it becomes bad very quickly if not done well in a way that's actually, like, I guess you'd call it like stable and tiles well. So how do I not just make another thing which ends up shit? And then how do I? There's like stuff like how do I just, okay, these are type of people who make things which are less shit for like religions and organizations kind of thing. How do I become that kind of person? What are the things I need to do? Then I saw ChatGPT and everything like went sideways. Cool. And so
yeah, I think constructing a religion is a very interesting, potentially important project that I have thought a little bit about. Seems very difficult, but yeah, seems interesting.
Yeah. Seems hard. So then the bottlenecks in the
just convert to Judaism. I mean,
I genuinely did consider it, but I think there's a flaws within Judaism as well. I think, for example, one of which is, I know it obviously was due to the moving to the desert and stuff, due to being invasion and stuff, but I think having the strong written tradition is a barrier for philosophical progress. I think you need to have, like, your philosophy needs to be forgettable. You need to be able to forget bad philosophy in order to iterate.
I definitely agree that there's an issue with not updating fast enough. I would more want to change the relationship with the written record. I think the relationship is already maybe better than you might know, or maybe
it could well be.
But I definitely agree that there's a problem there. Yeah.
Yeah. it also seems that there's definitely a lot of stuff about Judaism which I like. I like the idea of the Sabbath. I like the idea both in terms of like the structure it has on a community, and that like it makes the community like have to be together at least in some way for a while. The general like the stuff that it shares with Islam, I think are pretty good. But in context, I'm Hindu, because I think Hinduism is generally like the least incorrect religion. And I think it's had some of the wisest philosophers, due to the environment of India. Like any other place which had the environment of India would have also resulted in a similarly good philosophy, I think. And so I think,
as an outsider's perspective, I don't know nearly enough to make any judgment, but I'm very suspicious, mainly because of the relationship with the caste system.
Yeah,
maybe it's good.
Yeah. I think there's a huge difference between like the like peak philosophy of Hinduism and the practice of Hinduism. I think the practice of Hinduism, especially now, is quite terrible. And like if you look at a lot of philosophical texts, they actually basically talk down the caste system, and it was mostly made by like sort of kings and similar things rather than the philosophers. And it's definitely a failure of the philosophers that they failed to like bring about kings who like abolish that kind of thing. And I think that is one of the key failures of Hinduism, lacking a fire of leadership. I think it's one of the biggest failures of Hinduism, but compared to the failures of other religions, I think that's bad.
Gotcha.
But yeah, in terms of Judaism, like the Sabbath is generally really good. I like it a lot. I think the like long, arduous conversion process is also very good. I like it a lot. Another thing, I think this is not something which is specific to Judaism. I think this problem which basically every religion lacks, is a sort of a filtering out process. Like, okay, if you do this or you don't do this, then you are no longer a Jew, a Muslim, a Hindu, etc. Islam kind of has this, like, okay, if you eat pork or something, but I don't think that's really like a good enough thing. Like, I think you can, adhere to like a lot of like surface level rules while still not actually adhering to the philosophical principles well. And yeah, like I think Judaism is probably, as far as I'm aware, apart from Christianity, which is obviously a gigantic mess, as far as I'm aware, Judaism is the worst one for that, in that there's a lot of like people who like openly don't adhere to the philosophy at all, but are still somehow called Jews. I don't think that's very good. I think like for the philosophy to mean something and for the philosophical label to mean something, it should be, okay, if you adhere to the principles truly, then you are this thing. If you're not, then you aren't. I think, that kind of thing. Which anyways, but yeah,
interesting. Yeah. Let me just ask you, is there I have very constrained like attention and stuff, but is there like a one or maybe two short manuscripts or papers or books that you could point to that give an outsider like me some perspective or understanding of of Hinduism, or the parts that you find useful or
by far so in terms of like parsability, the most easiest to parse I think would be reading the Gita, and I think it's still like very high quality. So I think like reading it, like paying attention to it as a philosophical work rather than like as like this is what you should do kind of thing. Especially like talking about like, the mind. I think if you look at it in that way, it's very useful. Especially chapter 16, I think it's very, very good. The highest level work, in my personal opinion, is the Upanishads, but the Upanishads take a long time to understand. Like it's 15 pages. It's not like a long text, but I'm not exaggerating when I say like understanding one line took me months. And that's like I'd be putting like 20 plus hours, not 20, that's sorry, like 10 plus hours a day. I'd be thinking about that line.
Was it originally written in Sanskrit?
Yes. But
Are you reading
there's
it
like
in Sanskrit, or are you reading it in
no, there's
translation?
a pretty decent English translation. Let me find it. 1 second. Yeah. Yeah, like my process kind of was like I read it and I go, oh, that's what it means. That's really cool. And then I like think again. I'm like, oh, it means this.
Mhm.
Oh, it means this. Oh, it means this. And I keep going again and again and again. And
Yeah,
then
I
like
mean, I'm
kind of
familiar with. I mean, I've struggled. I mean, so like a math
yeah.
text might be like this,
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
or
Interesting. Hmm.
or like a high level
Yeah.
philosopher like Heidegger or something. You might have to
Yeah.
read several times and think about it.
Yeah. It's not even that like I would read it several times. It's more like that one line I'd keep thinking about, and then I like go out and do stuff in the world, and look at stuff and just think and like realize, oh shit, it means this. Yeah. So like that's, but like yeah, there's also an explanation section which I think you can like quite freely ignore, because the person explaining isn't as well versed and smart and wise as us. Um, but yeah, the actual like lines and text itself,
Cool.
in my personal opinion, is the greatest philosophical work I've ever read.
Cool. What I'd actually want, you probably don't have this off the top of your head, but just to say, what
Yeah.
I'd actually want is like a bilingual version with
Oh yeah, there's actually
well, not necessarily like it's not like I'm going to read the Sanskrit, but what I would want is a version that makes it whatever would make it easy for me to, because I would want to sometimes copy the Sanskrit word into like Wiktionary and then see the etymology of the word.
yeah, there's actually an app which does exactly that already. So one second, let me see if I can find it. Because something that's interesting, I don't know if you already know this about Sanskrit. Sanskrit was not a natural language; it's an engineered language.
No, I didn't know that. All I knew was that it was Indo-European.
Okay. Yeah, so Sanskrit was not a natural language. That's also why in Sanskrit there's no accents. Because so Sanskrit was something which like constructed. So like the actual like spoken tongue at the time by normal folk was not Sanskrit. And so like Sanskrit was basically something that like the priests and maybe some kings would speak about for like philosophy and like so maybe some legal texts, that kind of thing. And so the like is actually like constructed like, specifically around the tongue. Okay, this part of the tongue flows naturally and makes this kind of sound, etc. And there were like actually many linguists who debated like during that time, whose whole basically like life job was to decide which words and rules should be added to Sanskrit. And it's very much like based around the tongue. The reason I mention the relevance of this is that when deciding on a particular word or deciding on like kind of phrase, it was made in a way, okay, this is what's going to be good for philosophy and for what's needed. That process was obviously very imperfect, right? There's huge flaws in that. I think like something I'd be really interested to see is someone actually continuing that process and trying to make like, say, Sanskrit 2.0 based maybe not on the tongue and the mouth, maybe on the brain. Like what kind of like wasn't concepts like seem to rest well in the brain and stuff. But like anyways, that's not going to happen within our lifetimes, it seems. But yeah, we'll share the app in Discord. Because because it also has like the sound, like the Sanskrit said, like or sang rather, which I think gives sort of like, I know it's wooey, but it gives like the feel and vibe of it. I don't know how much sense that's going to make without the context of the larger culture, which obviously I just have by being Indian and like growing up with like Hinduish parents. Because you know, okay, this kind of like chant, is like this kind of like melodies, it's a kind of festival and stuff. So I don't know how much sense it's going to make without that cultural context. But yeah. Also, the translation in this app, the English translation is not as good as the translation in the PDF which I sent. So generally, like the translation in that PDF should be like seen as like better than the translation in here. But this app does have like the etymology and stuff, which is useful at times.
Well,
but anyway,
I think actually I probably can't use the app because what I want is to see the Wiktionary, not.
Oh.
That's
okay.
all right. I can if I want I can find a bilingual version of the. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know one for the Gita, but I don't know. 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 I yeah, I don't know off the top of my head something for the Upanishads. There probably is something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think Sanskrit. And you're probably not in the mood to learn a language. But yeah, I think Sanskrit's interesting as a language by itself.
I wouldn't. It's not that I would try to learn the language. It's more just that I would want to see, because it's Indo-European, right? So it'll have many distant cognates with words that I recognize from English or German.
I mean, I speak German. I don't think I.
There's probably more than you would imagine. Unless was Sanskrit? Did it have some sort of admixture? Was there like a non-Indo-European substrate or something?
I mean, very loosely, there was like, the like native tongue of people there, but like, it's not. I don't know much like about the Indo part of Indo-European languages, but like, I don't think so. The only commonality that I know has is it's a stress language. It's a stress-based language rather than a tonal-based language. That's the only commonality that I know of. There's also loosely the ability to sort of combine some words, but it does it very differently than German does.
I'm not saying grammatical difference. I'm saying lexical differences. Like the words will be descended from the same roots as other. Okay, so like an example is German or English.
Like Mutter and Mother, yeah. Like
the English word bottom is actually cognate. Do you know this? No. The English word bottom, I think, is actually cognate with fundus in Latin, meaning like ground or dirt, like foundation or fundamental. Okay. And that's like not obvious from just listening to the sound. Okay. It's like a distant cognate.
No, I did not know that. That's cool.
It makes semantic sense. There's a whole lot of these things where
okay, it might very well have that. Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing. So yeah, that could very well be. That could very well be happening. Yeah.
So to me, like just knowing these things makes the language much more rich and poetic, or like
absolutely
powerful. Yeah.
I think you can definitely find, if not that, then at least like the history of this word and stuff and what it came about. I know that's definitely a thing.
Well, I would just manually like for words that seem important or interesting, I would investigate there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
The PDF actually does explain that some of that stuff explicitly. Like it talks about the reason why Om, for example, is the way that it is. It's because the philosophy of it was that like if you like have your tongue on the bottom of your mouth, a lot of Sanskrit is based on the tongue and the mouth. And then if you like just like close your mouth fully, like as if you are going through all the possible sounds that your mouth can make. So when you say Om, it's like you're saying everything, like all possible ideas and sounds, etc. So that's what the word Om is meant to encompass. Mm-hmm. That's why it is that thing. So like that's one example it has, and I think it does that for some of the others as well. So yeah. Sorry, that's another tangent. Okay, I'm going to go unfortunately in 10 minutes. Okay, so then the bottlenecks on doesn't seem like a novel approach. Is there's on the bottlenecks for does Okay, I think actually none of the questions I want to ask will have a brief enough answer for the time that we have. Okay, cool. I think let's just call it there. And if at some other point you're available to maybe talk on some like actionable stuff, because I also want to at some point I want to hold like some kind of like hackathon or program kind of thing for human intelligence enhancement. Because I just want to see if we just get a lot of like smart-handed people to like work more on this. Can we make better progress on that?
You want to have a what?
Some kind of like hackathon or program, that kind of thing for human intelligence enhancement.
I see.
Just at some point, like if you are available to talk about that, what kind of structure that needs to have.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in that. Yeah.
Awesome, sweet. Thank you so much, Lee. This was a really, really interesting call.
Thanks, Kabir.
We have to meet you. Thanks so much. Bye.
Yeah, good to meet you.
Anything?